Hi, welcome to Melissa's Money Mindset. In today's video, I'm talking all things financial questions and conversations that you should be having with your partner in general, but definitely before you get married. So today is definitely going to be more of a chatty video, but I'm hoping that the questions I'm going to bring up can kind of help spark a conversation between you and your partner about your financial future together. So if that sounds good to you, then stick around. And before we get into the video, if you could please do me a huge favor and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you never miss another money-making tip. Let's get right into it. Now, whether you've just started dating, things are getting more serious, or you've recently gotten engaged, I highly recommend talking about finances before you actually get married and your lives are legally tied together. Now, my husband and I have been married for a little bit over 2 years, but we actually dated for 10 years before we even got engaged. So we had plenty of time to talk about finances, and I think finances came up probably more seriously about 2 to 3 years into our relationship. Granted, we started dating in college, and so since we've been together for so long, we have kind of been through all seasons of life together. And so our view of finances have changed over time and our goals have changed. Am I saying that my husband and I are always on the same page financially? I wouldn't say we're on the same page all the time, but I would say we're within the same book. I think you'd be really hard pressed to find a couple that agrees 100% of the time about everything financial in their lives, because there's so much to consider between how you spend your money, what your financial goals are, what you want to splurge on at the moment, what is important to you, your retirement goals, kids, college, weddings. There's just so much that's so expensive in everybody's lives. And right now, I think we're all feeling more of a pinch simply because inflation is high and income truly is not even keeping up with inflation. So I understand that a lot of people are just financially not in a wonderful position right now. But I think the most important part about this is being able to have an honest and calm and productive financial conversation with your partner without things getting too heated. And I say this because financial arguments have recently been found to be one of the top causes for divorce. And so I think that makes this an even more important topic to discuss before you officially and legally tie your lives together. All right, so let's hop into the questions. So question number 1 is, how much money do you make? Now, obviously, this is not something that you should lead with on a first date, but I do think that probably by the third date, you should at minimum know what their job title is, what company they work for, and you can probably get a good sense just by knowing those two things, roughly how much money they make. This is also going to be important because the longer you date, I'm sure the more activities you're going to be doing. You're going to be going out for dinner, going to a concert, maybe going away for the weekend, going on a vacation. And so usually, I hope, how much money people make greatly influences how much they spend doing those recreational activities. And hopefully the cost of those activities falls in line with their income at the time of you dating, unless they maybe make more than you and they don't mind paying a little bit more, or you make more than them and vice versa. But that again is an entirely other conversation that you should probably be having, and how you want to split up finances, especially if one of your incomes is significantly higher than the other person's. Now, as long as whatever arrangement you guys come up with works for you, I'm not here to judge. I don't think that's anybody else's business. You guys just have to find whatever works for you. But I will say that if your partner isn't even willing to have a conversation about this, to even let on, unless they want to flat out tell you a number, how much they make, I would say that this is a red flag. Why would they be hiding this from you? Do they have a reason for hiding this from you? Maybe they are being shady. Do they see a future with you? Like, what actually do they do for work? Those kinds of questions. So if they aren't even willing to answer this first question, I would have some red flags go off in my mind, at least. Question number 2, what is your net worth? Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that if you don't know what your own net worth is, I would highly recommend figuring that out before asking your partner what theirs is. If you don't know how to do that, it's just a quick Google search, or you can fill out a personal financial statement, and that should pretty quickly tell you your net worth as well. Now, this is important to just get a fuller picture of basically their financial history. So a personal financial statement or knowing somebody's net worth will basically tell you if they own any assets. So do they own a home? Do they own cars? Do they own jewelry? Do they own a business? Do they have any retirement savings? Maybe they have debts. Maybe they have some school debts, some auto loans, home loans, maybe even some medical bills. all of those things will be disclosed and will impact their net worth. And once you're married, you file your taxes jointly typically, and you'll basically find all of this information out anyway. And their income at that time of you filing jointly will then impact which tax bracket you fall into and how much money you pay in taxes. So this isn't some grand secret. You're going to find out eventually. So I feel like knowing somebody's net worth can tell you kind of just their financial history in general and give you a good picture of what their financial lives have looked like up until this point. Now, one last thing I wanted to say about net worth before we move on is that it's not unusual for people in their 20s, 30s, and potentially even 40s to have a negative net worth. And I say this because of student loans. Now, the cost of higher education is crazy and can follow people for years and years and years to come. And if their income doesn't completely offset their debt, then their net worth could actually be negative. It could also be negative if you have a home loan or car loan or medical loan. So any loans or any money that you're borrowing will count against your net worth. Question number 3 is, how much do you spend per month and on what? Now, you'll probably kind of get a feel for how your significant other is spending their money once you're around them more frequently. Are they going to the club every weekend? Are they ordering bottle service? Are they like buying a supercar every weekend? Or are they completely content with just staying at home and watching Netflix? Maybe they drive a cheaper car, like a Toyota Prius or something. All of those things are totally fine as long as you can afford whichever of those things you choose to be doing. Now, those are kind of the ends of the spectrum on each side of the financial curve, but most people probably fall somewhere in the middle there. And it's important to know what they're spending their money on and what they prioritize spending their money on each and every month. Now, I'll say this again, especially because you're likely not married yet, you don't have to agree about how to spend your money. As long as you're spending your money responsibly and you can afford to do the things that you're doing. If you want to jet off to Monaco and you can afford that, by all means, go and do that. If you want to get your hair and nails done, I don't think that your partner should really have anything to say about that, honestly, as long as you getting your hair and nails done does not affect your financial future together. Now, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a financial tangent here because I feel like this is the most important thing that you could take from this entire video. And that lesson is to always be financially independent. So I feel like I have always carried this self-reliance with me of, I always feel this pressure to be able to afford my own life independent of whoever I'm with at the time, regardless of what kind of relationship we have. I'm in a very loving, happy marriage, but I do still feel like I need to be able to pay for my own things. And I honestly do feel like I've come to accept the sad reality that money equals power. And I don't want anybody to ever be able to take that power away from me. The power to leave a relationship if it's not working for you, the power to choose your own financial future and the financial future of your children. Basically, just the ability to control your own life. And sadly, I feel like I hear so many stories, mostly about women who maybe they become stay-at-home moms after they have children, and maybe they're not in a good relationship and they feel like they don't have the option to leave because they can't even pay their own bills or their children's bills. And I just feel like that would be the worst case scenario, the worst situation, and probably the worst feeling in the entire world, that you don't have control over your own life. And I'm hoping that you all have partners that are only supportive of you and cheer you on and love you. And even if you do have a down year or two and you need some financial support from them, I'm hoping that, you have the drive in you to get back on your feet and you have the drive in you to maintain that financial independence. So thank you for listening to my financial TED Talk. Now back to the question. Maybe you're both savers, and I think there's a lot to be said about saving. I think saving is great. I think obviously there's a time and place for saving and everybody should be doing it, at least having an emergency fund. But I do think there's something to be said about splurging. Like if you won't even take yourself out to dinner like once a month, once every 3 months, it's okay to treat yourself as long as you can afford to do it. And so I think it's important to basically reward yourself if you're on track financially. So if you can afford to, don't be afraid to go out on a date night, maybe buy an experience instead of just buying stuff for each other, or find some financially meaningful way that you can both celebrate together. Question number 4. Are you currently saving for anything? So maybe they say, oh yeah, I'm saving for a house, or oh yeah, I'm saving for a car, Or I want to go on a vacation, and then you can ask them, okay, well, how much have you set aside to meet your goal? And if they say, well, nothing, then you kind of know that they have these goals, but they're not taking actionable steps to ever reach those goals. And I feel like that's a really important behavior to pay attention to, because I feel like that kind of behavior could be reflected in a lot of other aspects of life. Maybe during an argument about a specific behavior that they're having, they might not ever be willing to change something about themselves, no matter what the reward is at the end. And I also think it's important, maybe if they aren't saving anything for this goal that they supposedly have, what else are they spending money on? So this again would be a big red flag for me. Hopefully they are saving for that goal, but this question will kind of clear the water either way. Question number 5, do you have any financial non-negotiables? So maybe you're that kind of person who likes to stop and get Starbucks coffee every single morning on the way to work, even if you're spending $2,000 or more a year on coffee. Maybe that's your non-negotiable. And while some partners probably won't understand that, if that is truly a non-negotiable for you, that's important to get out of the way, especially if it's something that could potentially end up bothering your partner in the future. Maybe another non-negotiable goal could be saving X amount per month. So maybe you say, well, I want to save $500 this month, and if I can't save $500, then I don't think we should go out on a date night. So if that's your non-negotiable, it's important to tell your partner that upfront, just so that they know what the expectations are. And talking about how you're going to handle those non-negotiables, even if the budget is tight, maybe your budget is really tight this month, but you just are not at the moment willing to give up that Starbucks coffee, you need to have a conversation with your partner and kind of do some conflict resolution about how you're going to manage potentially some animosity about that Starbucks coffee, maybe some guilt about you getting the Starbucks coffee, or maybe you're willing to let the Starbucks go. Maybe you'll just get it every other day. So trying to come up with a reasonable solution alongside your partner is a great problem-solving technique, especially before you get married. Question number 6 is, what was your relationship with money growing up, and what did you learn about finances from your parents? Now, I feel like a lot of time financial values can be ingrained in you from things that you see your parents doing when you're young. I remember always watching my mom balance her checkbook at the kitchen table every single weekend, and she was so on top of it. But maybe you came from a family where you just flat out didn't talk about money. Maybe they thought talking about money was tacky or it was frowned upon, which I definitely don't think is true. I think the more you talk about money, the more you normalize money, the more healthy financial habits you can then come up with. Or maybe you come from a family with a really healthy financial background where you openly talked about finances. Maybe you had a piggy bank, they helped you open a savings account, or maybe they helped you balance your own checkbook or check your own first credit card statements. All of those things are so healthy. And so I think it's important to see where both you and your partner are coming from and potentially how you want your future children to approach finances. I think you also have to talk about, were you those kids who every time you went to the mall, you got a treat, or was getting a treat from your parents really few and far between? Because maybe you had this expectation that you deserved something every time you went to the mall. Or maybe you thought that getting something from your parents truly was a treat, and that can really perpetuate into how you view money as an adult. And I feel like social media has really done our generation a huge disservice here, because I feel like they have normalized like living these super extravagant lives that behind the scenes, whoever is posting these things really can't afford. They're getting themselves into a world of hurt for a few views online. So you'll see people buying crazy houses, buying yachts, driving supercars, taking these lavish vacations, and they can't afford any of it. But they are perpetuating that image out to a huge population of people who now think that that is the norm and that being financially irresponsible is okay. And I feel like that constant bombardment of all of these social media icons really seems to shape people's image of success. And I just want to reiterate that success is not any of those things, any of those mansions or supercars or crazy vacations or houses that nobody can afford. That is not success. Success is however you define it. So you need to actually sit and think about what happiness looks like for you. Are you only happy if you are surrounded by material items? I'm guessing not. I'm guessing it involves being surrounded by love, doing things that you love, being outside in nature, and maybe, treating yourself to a nice car or buying a reasonable house, something that's nice. But you don't need all of those crazy things to be happy. But you know what? If you can't afford those things and those things do make you happy, then I'm happy for you. So everybody just has to figure out what their definition of success is and figure out what their relationship with money is going to be moving forward. Question number 7 is, what are your housing preferences? And I feel like this can be pretty polarizing for couples. So maybe one person is totally fine with living on the outskirts of town, renting, and they don't mind commuting. And maybe they just want the smallest place possible so that they can pay the least amount of rent possible. So maybe they're happy with a loft style apartment. Now, maybe the other person is thinking more about the future, thinking maybe they want to have kids someday, and maybe they want to buy a house. Maybe they want to buy like a 3 or 4 bedroom house to fit all their kids in someday. So with one person okay with renting and the other person wanting to buy, you really need to have these conversations and figure out what's going to work for you now and what can wait for future years to come. I also think it's important to set the standard for, okay, do you want a really luxurious place, or are you okay with more of the bare minimum, bare bones kind of place? So I think having that discussion about housing is really important, because a lot of people may live together before they get married, but once they're married, their housing situation may change. Question number 8, what are your car preferences? So very similar to housing preferences, maybe you don't even need a car. Maybe you live like in Denver or Chicago or a big city where you could probably survive just fine without having a car because of all the public transportation, but maybe the other person really wants to have a car. So if they do want to have a car, what kind of car do they want to have? Do they want a fuel efficient car? Do they want a cool sports car? Do they want a muscle car? Do they want a truck? Do they want something that can go off-roading? Like, do they want a newer car? Do they want an older car? There's just so many things to consider here when you're talking about cars. And in addition to the actual price of the car, you're also going to have to pay for gas. So can your car only take specific types of gas? If you have more of an upscale car, usually they can only take like 93 or 95 octane gas. Maybe if your car is more fuel efficient, you'll have to pay for less gas. That would be nice. And on top of any gas bills, you're going to have to pay for car insurance, which is definitely not cheap. I feel like ours has gone up like 30%. We have State Farm. Ours has gone up like 30% in the last 2 years, probably. It's crazy. And also you're going to have to pay to register your car in whatever state you live. Now, cars do break down over time. They do need to be repaired. So that is just an extra cost that you're going to have to factor in. Question number 9, what are your vacation preferences? Now, maybe your partner will make this really easy and they'll say, yeah, I don't really worry about vacations. I'm totally content staying where we are. And maybe you feel the same way. Perfect. But a lot of people do like to take probably at least one yearly vacation or just do small kind of weekend trips. And those all add up. So I think it's important to talk about these vacations. Maybe you're going abroad. Maybe you're doing a big European vacation. Where do you want to stay? Are you going to stay in a hostel? Do you want to stay in a luxury resort? What kind of amenities are you okay with? Also, where do you want to go? If you're fine with going to a less traveled area like Portugal or Croatia, or maybe even just a small town in the US, then those vacations would probably be much more affordable. Now, if you're heading to LA, New York City, London, Paris, those places are all going to be much spendier. And so you have to budget accordingly. So it's important for you and your partner to be on the same page before you even start planning your vacation together. Question number 10 is, how do you feel about debt? Now, I actually had a family friend growing up whose parents would basically just judge whoever they dated based on how much debt they had. So if they had a lot of student loans, they'd be like, no. And so, you know what? I feel like everybody's opinion and approach to debt is completely different. Some people are terrified of it, like that example. Some people take on debt only when it makes sense. And I'll talk about that situation in a minute. And then there's people that I feel like just finance everything. They take on mounds and mounds and mounds of debt, and they try to stretch how long they can pay something off over just so that they can afford the monthly payments. And I feel like that's honestly probably most Americans. And I feel like it's kind of that keeping up with the Joneses situation and that pressure, that societal pressure to be successful, to look successful. And that really explains why the average car payment is over $700 per month in the United States, and also why people's homes are being foreclosed on, and also why so many Americans are in mounds and mounds and mounds of credit card debt. So I'll just say this, if you can't afford it, you don't need the biggest house on the block. You don't need the best, most fanciest car, and you don't need all of these things that you feel like you need to buy. They don't define you as a person. They don't define your success in this world. And I truly believe that being financially secure is worlds more important than anything that you could ever buy. Okay, so then there are people that will go into debt for very specific reasons. And that's where my husband and I kind of come into play. So we do act as real estate investors, and basically we make money in a number of ways here. So we'll find a property for a fairly affordable price, and we always at least put down 25% on that property. Then we find a contractor and we always pay for a renovation in cash. And then once the property is fully renovated, we know that we can rent that property for a premium. So we're making money in a few ways here. We are paying down the principal balance, one. We are earning cash flow and collecting premium rents each and every month. And we are also taking appreciation on the building. So just because of where we live, high cost of living, it's a very desirable area to live. Properties are appreciating like crazy here. And so we are just basically making money holding the property. And then in a few years, we hope that we can 1031 exchange basically the building that we have now for a bigger, more expensive building. And if you do a 1031 exchange and you're buying a like building, you basically don't have to pay any tax on that transaction, which is one of the incentives of being a real estate investor. So our goal basically is to rinse and repeat that process until we can afford some pretty big apartment buildings like down in Denver. And the great part about it is that since technically I'm a real estate professional, we can actually write off a portion of the real estate business expenses against our everyday job taxable income. So we're essentially going into debt in a calculated way with the intention of making money. Now, however you feel about debt, it's just important to get this out in the open because essentially when you get married, all of your debts become joint. So typically if you're buying a house together in the future, you're buying a car together in the future, any debt that you take out moving forward will likely be joint. Question number 11, how do you ideally want to split up finances and manage finances together? So for example, do you always want to split the bill evenly? Are you like going to be that person who's like, I already spent $50 this month, so you need to spend $50 this month before I will pay for anything else? Or are you kind of coming at this as a team? So maybe you want to split finances equally, whether you want to split them broadly equally or down to the cent equally, that's completely up to you. Or maybe one person makes significantly more than the other person. That's just something you're going to have to figure out. Are your hobbies and how you live and the things that you do together going to be tailored to the person that makes less money so that they can afford to still pay half? Or maybe the person that makes more money doesn't mind paying a little bit more because they're experiencing those things together. So I also feel like there's a huge cultural aspect of this because some cultures feel like one party, typically the male party, has to pay for everything. And I think that's kind of maybe like an old school mentality. I feel like that's not really how things are here in the US. Like maybe when you first start dating, but there's no way that someone would be like, yeah, you just need to pay for my whole life, you know? So I feel like that's just important to consider. And even if you are the party that's paying for everything, maybe that's making the other party uncomfortable, or maybe it's making them feel bad because they can't afford to pay as much as you're paying. And I feel like just that can cause a lot of animosity and potentially resentment, maybe from the person that's making more, that they don't feel like the person who's making less is contributing as much just because they don't make as much. So I feel like that's an important conversation to have and just kind of conflict resolution thing again to kind of hammer out before you even think about getting married. I also feel like this could kind of come down to perceived effort. So maybe one of you is a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad. And while you don't have a 9-to-5 traditional job, raising kids 100% counts as a job, probably multiple full-time jobs, honestly. And at the same time, you're also saving on childcare. So as long as your effort as a stay-at-home parent is being taken into consideration as being a contribution to the household, I feel like that's totally fair. Now, another topic that I feel like could fall under this category is, are you going to have a joint bank account? Now, every single couple is different. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. My husband and I have some joint accounts, some not joint accounts, just because we run payroll, we run businesses through certain bank accounts. And it's not that we don't want the other person to have access to it. It's just that kind of simplifies, like, just our money is coming in and just our money is going out to pay people. So maybe a simplified way of looking at this is you have a joint account for bills. So maybe both of your paychecks are deposited into the same joint bank account. All of your bills are pulled from that account, and then you each maybe have like a fun money account. So you can take a portion of your paychecks and transfer that over to your fun money account, and then you can spend your money however you want without potential judgment from your partner. Question number 12 is, are you saving for retirement? And what does retirement look like for you? So I feel like retirement age, I'm going to be honest, I don't know. Somewhere in the 60s, I would say. Okay, I just had to look up what the actual current retirement age is because I feel like my parents retired early. I actually feel like both of our parents are pretty much retired early. Anyway, the average retirement age in the US is currently 67 years old. I feel like that's older than I thought it was going to be. So anyway, I feel like it's important to have that conversation to figure out at what age would you like to retire? What do you want to do in retirement? Or maybe you're part of that FIRE or Fat FIRE, the financial independence retire early crowd. If you are, totally good for you. I think they like to retire at 40. So have some goals for how much money would you like to retire with? And what do you actually want to do in retirement? Do you just want to sit on the couch, or do you want your lifestyle to pretty much stay the same? Do you want to continue going on vacations, buy a house if you want to, buy a new car if you want to? You want the freedom to spend your money how you like. And what else are you saving for? So a lot of people like to, I guess, pay for their kids' college. They like to pay for their kids' weddings. So what other really expensive events would you potentially need to save for in the future? And should you take into account now? Question number 13, what are your long-term financial goals? I feel like this is a great question because I feel like a lot of people are very here and now and not potentially where they want to be in 10 years or 20 years or something like that. When you're in your 20s, when you're in your 30s, it's kind of hard to potentially think that far in advance. But again, I do think that this really speaks to how they're handling their current finances. So if they say that they're saving for retirement, if they say that they're saving for a house, are they truly doing those things? And are you on relatively the same page? What do you want to be doing 20 years from now? Do you want to be working at the same company, working your way up the ladder? Do you want to be working in a completely different profession? Maybe you want to be a stay-at-home parent. Maybe you want to be a business owner. Whatever your long-term goal is, it's important to get that out in the open with your partner, especially before you get married. And I also think it's really important to write down these financial goals to hold yourself accountable. So maybe you want to have enough money that you can donate X amount to charity. Maybe you want to leave a sizable inheritance for future children. Or maybe you want to be living it up in the lap of luxury with those supercars and those mansions. Or maybe you want to be totally off the grid, like living on a beach down in Costa Rica without a cell phone. Some days that sounds like an absolute dream. But whatever your long-term goal is, it's really important for you and your partner to establish that now so that you are at least on the same page in the same book when you get to be 67 years old or 40 if you're part of the FIRE community. And the last thing I'll say about that is that in order to achieve those goals, I also think it's important to write down actionable steps to take to get you there. And I also think it's totally fine to have joint long-term goals and separate long-term goals. Question number 14 is, how do you feel about a prenup? Now, prenups, I feel like, can be a very, very touchy subject because I feel like some people think it basically implies that you think that your marriage is not going to work. And I don't think anybody gets married with the intention of getting a divorce. So I don't think that that's the intention of anybody that's asking for a prenup going into this. But I think it's honestly really good to be realistic that almost 50% of marriages in the US end in divorce. And while nobody's goal is to get a divorce, I think it's important to potentially address a prenup while you both still like each other, love each other. So basically just view it as a protection. It's a protection for your joint assets and for your individual assets. And it's basically saying, hey, while we're still so much in love here, if anything did happen, God forbid, this is how we want things to be divided. This is how we want our assets to be divided in the most fair way possible. And the benefit basically of this is that it can really simplify things. I feel like you always hear about celebrities hashing things out for months and even years, just arguing about assets in court. And obviously those people didn't have a prenup in place because a prenup is pretty cut and dry and can really shorten your court proceedings. If you have any court proceedings at all, you might just have to deal with your attorney. Now, I'm assuming that getting a divorce is probably painful enough. So if you could just take one step to make that process go much more smoothly now. God forbid it ever happens. I don't know why you wouldn't take that. And if you're already married and you're thinking to yourself, dang it, I didn't do a prenup, I don't have a prenup in place, you can also do a post-nuptial agreement. So just contact an attorney and ask them about drafting that up for you. And again, I wouldn't necessarily come at this as, well, we need to have this really awkward conversation. I would just think of it as, we need to put these protections in place. I love you dearly. I cannot wait for the day that I marry you. But God forbid something happens. God forbid we have to go our separate ways. I want that to be as painless and easy as possible. Question number 15, what is your credit score? Now, again, same thing with knowing what your net worth is. If you don't know what your credit score is, you should. So I highly recommend going to Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, or even just heading to one of the credit bureaus. They are actually obligated to give you one free credit report each and every year. I have a Capital One credit card and a Chase credit card, and they both tell me my credit score when I log in each and every month to pay them off. So if you have an existing credit card, I highly recommend just checking on the website. Maybe you haven't found that section of their website yet. And the reason that knowing each other's credit score is so important is because now, let's say you're going to buy a home together, and maybe one of you has really poor credit and the other one has excellent credit, you could potentially be denied for a mortgage just because of that one person's poor credit. So basically, your entire financial picture is taken into consideration. Both of your credit scores are taken into consideration when you are applying for a home loan, a car loan, any kind of really important loan moving forward in your lives. So that just really would not be a great way to start your lives together, is to be denied for whatever you're trying to purchase just because somebody has a really low credit score and the other person didn't know that before they married them. Now, I do have an entire video series dedicated to how to improve your credit score, so I will link those up above. Make sure you check those out. And if you do have bad credit, don't panic. It's fixable. It's definitely going to take some time, probably years, I'll be honest, but there are definitely actionable steps that you can take to start correcting your credit score today. And my last financial question, number 16, is what is your timeline to start a family if you want one, and how much do you think kids will cost? Now, I think the current statistic is that the cost of having a child every year is roughly between $16,000 and $19,000, which is a huge chunk of change every single year. So I think it's important to establish, one, do you both actually want children? Because that would be terrible to get married and realize that actually one person never wants to have children and another one wants to have a family of 12. So let's just get that off the table. Then when would they like to start family planning? Do they want that to happen in 10 years? Do they want that to happen immediately after you get married? And how much do they think children will cost? So do they want to send their kids to daycare? Do you want to hire a nanny to help you at home? Is one of you actually going to quit your job and stay home so that you can save money on childcare? Or do you want to send your kids to a really expensive private school? Or do you plan on paying for your kids' college someday? So these are all really important things to consider and another huge life milestone. Point being, no two people have the same exact view and the same exact relationship with money and finances. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations before moving further with your relationship and even getting married. And obviously, you don't have to cover all of these questions at once unless you really want to, but things will probably come up as you just experience life together. So as you take your first vacation together, how much do you want to spend on that? Maybe when you move in together, they have to have proof of income, and they'll probably check your credit score at that time as well. And even potentially if you want to buy a home or purchase a car together, again, they will have to know what your credit score is and also verify your income then too. And finally, try to keep things light. Talking about finances can be really hard, can be really intimidating for some people, but as long as you maintain honest and open communication, you guys will be really glad that you had these conversations before getting married. So I hope that today's video has been helpful. If you enjoyed it, please do me a huge favor and hit that thumbs up button. As always, feel free to follow me on my social channels right here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.